In the previous video, I talked a bit about my father's lies, and I'm now going to go into his emotional deception, specifically his guilt tripping. Now, my father wasn't very skilled at guilt tripping as far as I could tell. I certainly wasn't guilt tripped very often. I didn't feel very guilty when he encouraged me to be this way, and nevertheless he did practice this very often and probably thought he was quite good at it. To give an early example, I was a small child, and I was sitting on the sofa watching television. Now, the sofa at that time was positioned in our living room so that my father's desk was just ahead of it and to the side of it, so that it may have seemed as though I could have been very well looking at his computer screen, though I was looking at the actual television screen. And my father turned to me and he claimed that I was trying to get him to leave the computer, trying to get him to feel very, very guilty about the fact that he was staying there, and making him leave so that I could sit there and play. Now, that wasn't true at all. I do remember that he did this several times though, and at one point I just felt that he really wanted me to sit there and play. Otherwise his belief would have been wasted, so to speak, and I just thought that. And I actually sat down and used the computer for a little while. But it's bizarre how he just decided on these things, or rather took the opportunity to complain about something. He also tried to guilt trip my mother a lot during his arguments with her, well, towards her rather. He called her a viper once, and what he usually did was use very stereotypical expressions. He said, for example, that she was eating his soul. He said that she was killing him. I actually believed that once when I was very small. And he said that other people had wives who were far more supportive than she was. He said this while she was crying, of course, and while she was feeling very helpless. And he also said that he has to watch every word he says while he is around her, that he has to walk on eggshells. And the tone he used when saying this was very loud. He tried to sound very imposing and express his anger, his irritation, his desire for justice, whatever it is he was trying to fake. And nevertheless, this, no matter how fake it looked, it did make my mother cry. He also said about her that, this was really perverse, that other people were hurting him through her. When she complained about the fact that, if I recall correctly, other people had, some kids in the block had pissed in the hallway in front of our doorstep. And when she complained about how everyone in the block treated us badly, we live in a very, very bad neighborhood. We live in quite a bad neighborhood. When she did that, my father just told her that those people were hurting him through her because she was complaining about it. That's as perverse as it really can get, I think, and I just cannot fathom why he would have said that. He also complained to her that she was trying to get me on her side when I was young. She was always very nice to me, but at the same time I would say very codependent, in that she wanted to do things for me and to keep me a child, a small child, forever. And it was only just inevitable that I would grow up eventually. So my father said that that she was splitting the family and that she was trying to get me on her side. My father also complained that we didn't have a high enough level of gratitude towards him. That, for example, I once came and opened the door for him when he rang the bell. He was carrying groceries, And I just turned to leave, and my father was upset by the fact that I wasn't grateful enough, by the fact that I didn't show enough enthusiasm when coming to the door to greet him. And for the next several occasions, I did come to the door enthusiastically and greeted him, but that was just enthusiasm that I imposed upon myself. It wasn't, I would say, genuine, and I was wondering, why should I feel enthusiasm over this? Why does he want me to feel this? There's nothing to be enthusiastic about here. He's just coming in with groceries. He always wanted us to be respectful of him as well. He didn't deserve it, of course. And he was very, very quick to call us, well, to call us ungrateful when we weren't. To give an example, there was one time when my mother and my brother were talking about how my father wasn't getting enough money to the house. Now, I was quite young back then, and even so, I realized that this was not the primary concern in the household. I would rather that we had all been poor and good to each other than that my father was richer and more of a scumbag. And when my father came back home, because he wasn't home while the two of them were talking, don't remember exactly how, but I told my father that my mother and my brother had been talking about how he wasn't getting enough money to the house. This was part of a conversation in which he asked what was going on. But I'm nevertheless disappointed that I actually told him this, because, well, I was snitching essentially, and I don't think I felt that I was snitching at the time. I didn't see anything wrong with being honest, but nonetheless I was snitching, even if it wasn't deliberate. So when he heard that my mother and my brother had been complaining about him, he immediately went into a tirade about how we treated him like an ox, like a workhorse, like he just had to slave away for us and bring us money, and how we were never grateful towards him, how we just treated him like a sucker and a fool who got exploited by us. That was his guilt trip. I know that whenever we had problems of any kind, my father started complaining about it. He raised his voice and said, "What's going on? What's the problem?" And that always encouraged us not to talk amongst ourselves about the problems that we had, I guess. Well, in certain circumstances we didn't. So he also was critical of my brother, and he told my mother, for example, that after my brother had crashed his car yet again because he drove very recklessly, he said that my brother was a spoiled rich kid. There's a word for this, an expression in Romanian, băiat de bani gata, meaning kid for ready money. That's the literal translation, and that's what he said that my brother was, even though he wasn't giving him a lot of money. He had a lot of other guilt trips, but the one that I think is the most definitive example of him complaining, him being a drama queen, him playing the victim, was when it was late at night and I happened to be near the living room. Now at this time my father was sleeping in the living room because he didn't want to be around my mother, who was schizophrenic, and he told my dog, well, okay, the family dog, one of the two dogs, that it was really all his fault, the dog's fault, that everything was going wrong. And my father sounded genuinely upset and disappointed when he said that. He really told the dog that it was all his fault. Now, I think this was eye-opening, though I'm very incredulous about that, because you don't tell a dog that sort of thing with intent, because the dog won't understand the words. So it's not as if you're being clever and manipulative. You genuinely feel in these situations that it's actually the dog's fault, or rather you're trying to find someone to blame, and there's the dog right in front of you. I was surprised by that, and I think it really points to how deep my father's narcissism is.